Hello, I'm Noah, and today I want to discuss values, the universal truth of values, to understand why people do what they do, why you do what you do. So, essentially, just diving into it, the universal truth, as I've learned it, is that all people act by what they value. Anything anybody ever does will be in accordance with something that they value, and that seems pretty obvious. We can just as easily say that anything anybody ever does will be to bring them happiness. But happiness is just a byproduct of doing what you like to do. And there will always be those people that act against what brings them happiness. You know, sometimes you make a compromise for a friend and you're not quite happy about it, but you do it because you have to, because you value them, because you appreciate them. So the more accurate truth would be that all people act by what they value in all cases. Now, these values, we get them from family, from friends, just really from whatever life throws at us. We get them from living through life, from all these different influencers, and they mold us one by one. That's how we put together our values, and we have many of them. They define who we are. They're responsible for what we do, what we say, what we think. In a sense, they're our passport through life. They're our reason for existence. They give our life meaning and dictate what we will do in it. Though it's important to say that not all values are equal. I want to bring in a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt, and that quote is, "Small minds discuss people, average minds discuss events, and large minds discuss ideas." And we'll talk about the middle part, about events, later. Right now I just want to discuss the two extremes for simplicity. So, small minds discussing people and large minds discussing ideas. So, why that makes small minds small and great minds great. So, discussing people or objects helps nobody. You're only recognizing the existence of something. You're bound to be under the physical restrictions of that object or of that person. You're not creating anything new. You're just recognizing what is already there, what's already established. Ideas pave way for change because they're not bound by any material limits, and they allow you to add on from any point of view. Ideas can be universally appreciated and respected. Ideas also require comprehension and intellectual strength. So, ideas from an academic sense are just naturally superior, but we want to talk about universal truths here. So, ideas, furthermore, are an exploratory heading. They give you a question to answer, to produce, whereas discussing people, you're not producing anything, you're just consuming what's there. Ideas are active headings, whereas objects and people, discussing them, it's just a passive existence. So let's put this into the context of values. So a value of an object is a materialistic value, and these materialistic tendencies have a negative connotation, and for good reason. So if you're materialistic, you're going to be concerned with the restricted physical nature of something. You're not going to be producing anything, as I previously said. So you'll never contribute anything of worth when you're concerned with subjective appreciation, because what you like to look at, what you like to hear, what you like to feel, smell, or taste is not the same as what somebody else might. So with ideas, it's something that can universally be appreciated. You don't need to have preferences to give your take on an idea. So appreciating objects, being materialistic, there's an end to it. You're restricting yourself. And as I said, with an idea you produce. When you're discussing objects, when you value things, you're only consuming. So let's put this into context. Say there's somebody that enjoys food. They love eating it. They just go to a restaurant and enjoy themselves. That's it. They just consume, and they're happy with that. But let's take that to the next level. Say that same person thinks about why they value food, and they decide that they are amazed by how the flavors of food translate to emotions. That is now an idea. They now value how flavor can translate into emotion. Now they can produce, researching the idea and appreciating it. They have something to put out there, something interesting. They now have an appreciation that is productive, something that they can actively attend to, something that they can build on. So now we'll go back to the middle of the quote. Events, average minds discussing events. Now, the word average has this negative connotation to it, and it may very well be a negative practice to have your primary values be average. So let me get into what I mean by this. So let's say I value discipline. That's not quite a thing. That's not quite something tangible, but that's also not an idea. That's a practice. So that's something that if I were to value that primarily, if that were my primary and flagship value, that would be very neutral because I'm not consuming, but I'm also not producing. That's in the middle gray area. But all the same, they are necessary, having those middle values. What's bad is when you have those as your primary values. So the reason they're necessary is because they're what I call constructive values. They're what you value that dictates how you act, not necessarily what you do. So if I value discipline, but my primary value is how the taste of food translates to emotion, how I go about researching that is going to be affected by my value of discipline. I'm going to go about that with a disciplined manner. It's a constructive value. It dictates how I act and how I go about it. It operates how I conduct my life. There's an issue with that though, because when I value discipline, somebody else might not, and that causes conflict. So there's this dichotomy between self-reliant and social values. I value discipline, so I'm going to practice it personally, but somebody else might not practice it because they don't value it. If I'm being honest, that really doesn't matter. You shouldn't be concerned with somebody else. If I get frustrated, that's entirely my fault. I have to understand that we all have different values. And in all actuality, in an ideal situation, it doesn't matter at all if somebody values laziness or discipline when coming to this, because both are going to yield results. All that happens is, say there are two people that have an idea and they want to work on it, and one values ease and relaxation, and one values getting things done on time, disciplined, with a militant style. Working together, they're both going to yield results, but those operative values just dictate how fast they are going to yield those results, and how well they're going to cooperate. So that's the ideal situation. And I'll give an example of this. Say there are two scientists. Scientists often have equal values. They are usually educated and disciplined and get things done, and they have a common goal. So two scientists will work together well and get something done quickly, get something done on time. But then there are two leaders of different nations. They have the same values in the long run to protect their own nation, but their operative values might be different because they're from different places and serve different people. So in the end, they'll both reach a compromise and discover something, but the way they work together might suffer a little bit because of their different operative values. So both yield results. Now, if your primary value is reliant on concerning other people completely, then that's destructive because you're no longer adding purpose only to your own life. You're helping other people, and they may not want the help. So you have to understand who you are and what you value and what's going to benefit you. Think about this. The only true crime that exists is preventing somebody from practicing what they value. And all laws are made around that because we all want to practice what we value. So if your values are concerned with other people, that's going to be destructive for you and maybe even other people. Now, this basic law is important to maneuver throughout life because if you're ever disappointed with somebody or frustrated, you need to understand that they just value different things. They're not going to have the same values as you, and they have a different perspective. And it's very interesting to argue with people and try to get their perspective. Now, when you argue, being defensive or offensive is never necessarily a good thing, but trying to understand their viewpoint can prove eventful and can prove fruitful. And in this arguing, your value might even shift because you may see that they might be right, or it can strengthen your value if you see that they're wrong. But either way, it's okay. That's not a bad thing if it shifts because you're just moving closer to what you might more steadily identify with, something that you didn't know about yourself before. So you always want to consider that different people have different values, and it's always interesting when you meet somebody new to try to guess what their values are, to guess how they act. This can make people predictable, and you'll never necessarily be disappointed with them. And while it may seem completely scattered because there's all these different values and it'll be so hard to find peace and find compromise, there's one value that unites us all. And really, simply all it is that we all value the ability to practice our values. We all want to have the freedom to do what we want. And that unifies us all. That's something that we can all agree with. And that's where all laws are made. That's where all rules are set to allow us to do this. So next time somebody gets mad at something you say, or next time you get mad at something somebody says, think about why they said it. And furthermore, if you enjoy something, think about why you enjoy it. Turn that materialistic value into something that you can actually think on and build on.